Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Jesse Patrick Turner. I'm the director of the CCSU Literacy Center, and I'm a well-known education activist and researcher, scholar, and I'm here today to talk about critical race theory over there. So when I'm looking at what's going on with critical race theory right now and all the, I would call it mass hysteria, where people are questioning it, and I'm like, what's there to question? Critical race theory is really not just one theory, it's a set of theories that helps you deal with systemic racism and structural racism. It's a legal form. It's not a curriculum. You don't teach critical race theory in K-12 schools, but critical race theory helps us understand the mechanisms of structural racism that have denied people their stories. And so when I look at who's shouting right now, I've seen hysteric people at board meetings saying, don't indoctrinate us. I saw it was funny, my friend Bob said that he's got a neighbor that has MLK yes, CRT no, education yes, indoctrination no. And if you really understand the attack upon critical race theory, then you would understand that you can't have Dr. King and say no to critical race theory. You just can't have that. And so when we think about it, to help people understand, I'll take us outside America a little bit to understand how this works. So recently in Northern Ireland, the Irish government and the English government have in 1985, they signed an Anglo-Irish Accord, which was to help bring peace in Northern Ireland. And one of the little things they had there was that one day the Irish language could be introduced as an elective in Northern Ireland Irish schools. Now think about that. We're talking about the Irish language, that's Gaelic. It was illegal to have that as an elective in Irish schools. So the Anglo Accord said this time would come. And Northern Ireland is not a homogeneous community. You have a group of people in the nation that want to be part of England and don't want anything to do with being Irish. And then you have another group who are very proud of being Irish in the history. And you have 800 years of oppressive behavior to Irish people and the Catholic people in Northern Ireland. And the very fact, you should understand that if I make your language illegal to teach in your own public schools, well, that should give you an idea. So critical race theorists, if they were in Northern Ireland, they would say, can't introduce the Irish language. No, they're trying to indoctrinate us. But in reality, why would you not want to do the Irish language in Northern Ireland? Because if I know my language, then I know my history. And if I know my history, I know my story, I know my narrative. And what does that do? That tells me what you did to me. That tells me the history of oppression. And it's the first step. Critical race theory is the first step to saying, stop it. We stop the oppression today. We open up the stories. And that's just one. So language. Just the idea that, on July 12th, it's the Orange Day in Northern Ireland. They were burning tricolor flags and condemning this new, it's an elective. You can teach Mandarin, you could teach French, you could teach Russian, you can teach Swahili. But for 800 years, you couldn't teach the Irish language in Irish schools in Northern Ireland. Keep that in mind. Now that's an example. I make the connection. The other example would be Native Americans. So we've heard about the boarding schools up in Canada. Well, there are boarding schools in America. There were boarding schools in Ireland. They began with the Carlisle boarding schools. And the purpose in Ireland of the boarding schools during the famine was to take the Irish out of the Irish. That's what it is. So what would the anti-critical race theory want? Not to talk about that. They don't want you to remember. They try to take your language, your culture, your history. So this is what we're talking about. When you attack critical race theory, what you're really doing is you're saying that We don't want the stories of immigrants. We don't want the stories of former slaves who built our White House. We don't want John Lewis. We don't want the story of John Lewis. I go to Selma almost every other year, and how many times I ran on that bridge just to be on that bridge when John Lewis was on that bridge, just to be in the crowd next to him. They don't want John Lewis. They don't want Sojourner Truth. They don't want Harriet Tubman. They don't want Susan B. Anthony. They don't want the suffragettes. They don't want labor. They don't want this. I don't know. Who do they want? I'll tell you who they are. Who are these hysterical critical race theory people who are trying to stop diversity from our classrooms? Just go down to Stone Mountain, Georgia, and look at that giant monument to Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, General Stonewall Jackson, 3 men responsible for nearly 300,000 Union deaths. And we build a monument to them? My grandfather fought in World War I. My uncles and fathers fought in World War II. There's no Nazi monument in America. So who are these people? They want to protect a park that lifts a lie. That's who they are. So I'm here to tell you that what is critical race theory? It's the truth. It's when I was the last time I was in Selma, President Barack Obama was there. It was 2015. And he gave one of the most powerful speeches anyone's ever made. He was with John Lewis. Could you imagine John Lewis? And Barack Obama saying, my hero's here today. John Lewis is here. And John Lewis introduces him and says, I can't believe that I would have never believed I would introduce a black president. But he talked on that day and he said, who are we? And he talked about Japanese internment camps and Japanese men who went to fight against Japan for America in World War II. He talked about the Navajo Code Talkers. He talked about Sojourner Truth. He talked about Susan B. Anthony. He talked about John Lewis on that day. If you were to wipe out critical race theory, what do these people want to do? They want to take the history out of America. And history, everyone knows, means high truth when you go back to the Greek root. Well, what is high truth? If I take out slavery, what is high truth? If I take out immigration, what is high truth? If I take out labor, what is high truth? If I take out Jim Crow, what is high truth? If I take out the rights and the struggles for LGBTQ rights, when America said, all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, you can't have that without having critical race theory. So I'm a defender of critical race theory. If being for critical race theory means that I'm for historical truth, I'm for the narratives of all Americans, if that's what it means, if it makes me feel uncomfortable to be able to face the slavery, to face Jim Crow, to face all the difficult things that were done in the name of our government at that time. Just before this here, my dissertation, critical race theory, back, I don't know, this one's 2000. I used to teach on the Tohoto-O'odham Reservation in Arizona. And how does critical race theory work? Well, we didn't know it existed then, or at least I didn't. But my students had come across a piece of SOAR 500 Nations, a documentary, and they talked about the Sand Creek Massacre. And what was the Sand Creek Massacre? Well, that was where the fighting parson, Kernan Shibleton, went and massacred 500 Native Americans who were under the protection of Abraham Lincoln, who were under the protection of American flag. He ordered his soldiers to kill the women and the children. And then he rode into Denver Man, this is the fighting parson. This is a pastor riding to Denver, and on his saddles, on his horses, are the mutilated body parts of female women, natives. And you see, my students heard about that, and then they found out that, well, they did put him on trial, but they let him go. And so when we look at this, the students created, this is the story in here, a collaboration. The students said, we want to have a new trial. We want a trial. What if there was one Native American on the jury? What if there were two? What if there were three? What if all the jury was Native Americans? And you see, that's how it works. My students, they had to deal with difficult history, painful, what happened to their people. But you see, this isn't indoctrination. This is liberation. This is when your narrative can help change your perspective. This is when you break the chains of slavery. This is when you break the chains of oppression. This is when you say to the world, I'm black and I'm proud. I'm Latin and I'm proud. I'm gay and I'm proud. This is when you say to the world, you can't hold me back. So what's critical race theory? It's you can't hold me back. And what are those people afraid of? They're afraid that their racism will be exposed. And they're afraid we will turn around and I will say to them, how could you have two generals and a Confederate president that is responsible for the death and murder of over 300,000 Union soldiers? How could you worship them and honor them in this nation? That's what critical race theory is. I question Stone Mountain, Georgia. I question every Confederate monument. I question historical lies, and I fight for historical truth. I hope that makes sense to you. Critical race theory isn't the enemy, but what we should be doing is say, who are these people who are afraid of history? And then I think you know who they are. They're the Nazis, they're white supremacists, they're the Klan, they're racists, they've been there for 1,000 years. And what they're afraid is if we know what they did to us, then we can say to them, stop it. And if we say stop it, they fall apart, they are disempowered. Because the truth of the matter is, white supremacy doesn't want to stop it. They want to continue it. So, hey, if being for critical race theory means I'm against white supremacy, power to the people. Thank you, Dr. Turner. Peace, love, happiness.